Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern is with us. Very good morning to you.
Good morning to you.
Just for clarification's sake, the Treasury information that's coming today, is that scenarios or actual statistics?
Scenarios.
Okay, so just what they're thinking.
Yeah, they're likely to cover three different areas, and it is very much the Treasury scenarios and their numbers. But what they're running are different scenarios for the different alert levels based on different lengths of time that we might be in them. They're looking at different scenarios around the global economy and also the impact of potentially different support packages that the government could be a part of in the future.
The assistance coming tomorrow, is that for the media or for others as well?
We're looking at this week at small and medium-sized enterprises particularly. I am going to answer a few questions, at least have a bit of signalling over the timeframes that we're working on for the media. That won't be in one stage. It's likely to be over a couple of stages.
And so the information coming on this assistance for small and medium-sized businesses, is this beyond what you've already done?
Yes, yeah.
So is that a admission that what you've done isn't enough?
No. We've always said that we would have a rolling piece of work. Looking at the major impacts on businesses, of course, the wage subsidy is a huge part of the picture, employment costs, but then there are issues around their ongoing overheads, so lease arrangements, rentals for commercial properties. That's an area where we've been doing some work. We're looking to put something out on that soon, but we've also been looking beyond that. It is incredibly tough for those businesses that have fixed costs, and we've always recognised the wage subsidy is only one part of that.
In what form will media assistance take?
And I don't want to get too far ahead of my colleagues having a chance to consider some final packages on that. Mike, as I've said before, though, and as we'd all agree, now more than ever, we're proving the importance of having news information people can trust, accessible information sources. But at the same time, coronavirus has exacerbated an existing problem, which is that for the advertising dollar, there's far more places now that dollar can go. It's diluted then for the media who need it. And so we're looking broadly at the environment, and it can't just be about COVID, because we need to make sure that these are viable entities beyond lockdown, and that means looking at their situation beforehand too.
And when you talk about the advertising dollar going to more places, that sort of got brought up in the Commerce Commission hearing between NZME and Stuff last year, and the Commerce Commission rejected all of that thinking, and yet they presumably need to rethink that, don't they?
They did, but again, I do just need to make sure, because, of course, we've got to let some final decisions be made by my cabinet colleagues, and so I don't want to get ahead of that. But we are incredibly aware, and nothing's probably shone more of a light on the issues that we have within the media than obviously being in a situation where everyone needs it, but the advertising dollar is really, really constrained.
The Trans-Tasman bubble that was thought up over the weekend by the head of the Auckland airport, is somebody somewhere actively talking about that?
We're actually talking about smart borders generally. So whether it's Australia or whether it's anywhere else in the world, obviously we're in a unique position to get ourselves in a really firm footing with COVID in a way that other countries may not be able to. And I'd say Australia's in a similar position. But what we need to then do is make sure on an ongoing basis the border isn't a risk for us. So what does that look like? Now, we're really clever with biosecurity. We need to become clever around COVID, the management of COVID-19 at the border. I do want to have a conversation with Scott Morrison about this going forward. At the moment, both of us are quite focused on the here and now, but we will look beyond. And on Friday, I had a conversation with Prime Minister Lee of Singapore. Now, they've got a similar issue. They've been dealing with COVID in a similar way to the way we have and Australia has. But they're, of course, reliant on being a transit hub. Huge amount of people transiting through Singapore or travelling into Singapore. And so we've agreed that we're going to do a piece of work together on smart borders. What does the future look like in terms of having people safely come into your country, and how will technology be able to help us with that?
Are you any further advanced? The suggestion this morning was that you've gone off the tracing apps that they're using. Have you?
No, not at all. But I've always said that they can add to what we do, but they will never be the complete answer. Well, not at this stage, maybe in the future. But even talking to, again, Singapore, who are one of the places that many people herald for having bought in an app, he was really clear there's issues around whether or not different phones talk to one another, how they work in different environments. The level of accuracy, Bluetooth sometimes is variable in its accuracy, GPS is even worse. So his real message was, they add something, but they are not a complete picture. You have to have really good sound, people-led contact tracing as well.
Yeah. The logging industry is saying this morning they should have been open for the last couple of weeks. There are certain parts of the country, East Cape would be a good example, where they could have happily logged. There's pent-up demand in China and they want to get on with the business. Are you hearing that? And why the insistence of 4 full weeks for the lockdown for people like them?
I've been hearing different industries making that. I mean, they're not alone on that, but level 4 is the highest level we can move to, and it is the level where we needed to be to get control back. What we're considering at the moment is then what does level 2, what does level 3 look like? Let's put out the detail on that on Thursday, so we've got a bit of time to really iron through that detail with different sectors. This week we are going out to the retail sector, hospitality sector, working through what some of the detail of those different alert levels look like, and we should be doing that with primary sector too.
But the pressure's going to come on you, though, isn't it? But pressure's, Norway's open this morning. They're not all open, completely open, but Norway, the Czech Republic, Denmark, those sort of places, even Spain's going back to work, and they're way worse than we are. And so the pressure's surely going to go on us and go, well, come on, let's get moving here.
Oh, look, firstly, I'd say the pressure's always on, Mike. That's the very nature of making decisions like this. But I spoke to the Prime Minister of Denmark last night. They're still getting a couple of hundred cases a day. And so they are considering lifting some of their restrictions. And again, with Spain, they're allowing some construction to go back. But every single country in the world right now is trying to make a decision around how do they bring back their economy without risking another outbreak. The number of people, this has been devastating, and yet the number of people in each country who has had COVID relative to the population has been small. Every country risks second waves. We're trying to position New Zealand differently to get ourselves in such a firm footing that we have absolute control, that we are stamping it out, and we can get our economy back to normal as soon as we're able without risking any resurgence of this infection.
Could you argue that Australia's done it better than us to the extent that on a per head of population basis, yesterday's number was vastly better than ours was. Overall, their numbers are better than ours, not much, but a bit. But their economy's been more open than ours, and therefore the cost might not be as high as the one we're going to pay.
A couple of different issues I'd see there that makes it a bit difficult for some direct comparisons. They have had varying degrees of lockdown in different states. They have been at a different point in the infection than us, so we're a bit behind them in terms of that curve from the time that we had our first cases. And the third point I think that's really important is that actually when we went into lockdown, our infection rate was higher, so we were in a more difficult position. So it's not completely apples and apples, but I've spoken to, and had a bit of a few exchanges with some premiers over there, and at least with Scott, obviously, and we are talking to each other and really leaning on each other's advice and what each of us are doing. So I think we recognise that we've each had to make our own decisions based on our own scenarios.
But they've got a good model. If you look at their model, theirs is a good model, isn't it?
And I wouldn't say they're wholly different to what we're doing as well.
Well, you can get coffee, you get pizza, you get married and have your hair cut.
Again, different. They're at a different stage in the infection.
But you've been able to do that all the way along, though, is what I'm saying.
Oh, Mike, again, I'd also point out that we've adopted a strategy that many others are pointing to as being a good one, and I wouldn't say that success means that we have not done the right thing.
That's my subtle point. My subtle point being was no question health-wise we're a success story, no question, but so are they, but they're more of an economic success story than we are.
We weren't in the same place as them. Mike, when we went into lockdown, our infection rate was as high as 5. So if every person that was catching COVID, they were passing it on to up to as many as 5 people.
What are we down to now? Dire. Because they're between 1 and 2. They think they'll be below 1.
We're hovering around the 1 mark.
Well, there you go. So we're at the same level we are, but you can still get coffee, still get pizza, still get a haircut, still get married.
Again, as I'm pointing out, they are in a form of lockdown as well, Mike.
Yeah, but not as much.
and we are assessing whether or not we're in the right place to move to. But I am going to listen to the experts. I am going to take the advice, because we are trying to position New Zealand in a way that many other countries do not have the ability to.
One of the experts, Simon Thornley, this morning, epidemiologist, he's come out with what he calls, along with a bunch of other academics from universities around the country, what he calls Plan B. Basically, he says, short of the borders, they should be still closed, but short of that, we should be back to work. We've overestimated this.
And again, I'm going to disagree, and I'm.
But why are you disagreeing with that expert, but not another one?
I'm happy to set out why I disagree, and I think it's safe to say that there'll be a large portion of the public health community who would disagree too. Simon, for instance, and everyone is entitled to their opinion, but Simon, for instance, put forth the notion that we should follow Sweden. Sweden now has 10,000 cases. I'm not of the view that the Swedish model was a good one. It's not the path we have chosen, and so I do disagree with his position on this.
But as you look at the numbers as we have them this morning in this country, and the number of empty hospital beds, and the amount of ICU capacity we're using up, the numbers speak for themselves. We've got this, for all intents and purposes, under control, haven't we?
And again, just remember, Mike, one case and we have real life examples of this, can lead to a massive outbreak. So we still have, as of yesterday, we had 19 new ones. And what matters is not just the number, but what they tell us. We are now digging into every one of those cases, and if we have examples where we can't tell where it came from, we need to make sure there's not an iceberg underneath it. I am not going to waste the good work of New Zealanders at level 4 because we were too premature. And that is my responsibility, and I take it very seriously.
Appreciate your time as always. Jacinda Ardern, the Prime Minister.